Hello and welcome to the worst team up ever. This is the Falcon and Winter Soldier after show from the Comic Crush. I'm Paul, as always, and I'm here with my my co-worker and, well, you know, acquaintance Liz.
Hello.
Liz, it's lovely to see you again. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Glad to hear it. Pumped for this week's episode.
So excited! I can tell you.
I knew you would be. The moment I hit stop on Friday morning, I was so tempted to message you and say, you know, wow, what an episode we got to talk about. So kicking off straight away, we're into kind of flashback territory. And we're back into an area we've never actually seen before, which is Bucky's time in Wakanda. You know, deprogramming from all the stuff that Hydra put into him in the war years. I quite like that. I recently heard that apparently fans, when they meet Sebastian Stan, will come up and quote those lines to him in an attempt to switch on.
Amazing.
But it does make you wonder what some of those fans want to use him for, really.
Who knows?
Yeah, Liz will be rewatching the episode, writing those words down once we've switched off, just waiting for the next con.
Oh my god.
But yeah, like it's this period we'd never seen before, and we kind of get more on Io and her relationship with Bucky, and of course she definitely is the character that I thought she was, which is the woman who kind of had the moment with Black Widow in
Civil
War. Yeah.
So I mean, she's been there, you know, since they introduced the Wakandans.
Yeah.
But she's been in more of a support role previously. And this was really nice. You actually get like a really, you know, human moment with her because, like, you know, she's, you know, just been nothing but full on intimidating in most of the other interactions, you know, we've seen with her because she's this fierce woman. But we get to see this, like, you know, this really like sort of lovely moment between her and Bucky. You know, where she shows like another, you know, a softer side, and you see their bond, which is really nice, which, you know, absolutely kind of makes what things that happen later in the episode more poignant. But yeah, I mean, that whole scene of her sort of setting him free and everything basically had me in tears too. Like, you know, I mean, it was just, you know, poor Bucky. He's really had it rougher than just about anybody in the entire MCU, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's debatable. I don't know. Has he suffered more than anyone?
The answer is, like, who else could have possibly suffered more than Bucky? I don't know. Honestly, we're accepting submissions for this. Anybody in the comments?
Yeah,
anybody who has, please tell me.
This is exactly the sort of thing that starts internet fights. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Do, as Liz has said, put it in the comments and let us know if you feel that Bucky is like the most persecuted person in the MCU, or is it someone else? I don't know. So all up to you guys. Let us know. But part of this thing is they give Buck sort of 8 hours to kind of you know, get his use out of Zemo, and then they're taking him back. Dan Bussey, who viewers will know, I mention every week, because every week Dan, bless him, sends me a message and we chat a little bit about the episode, and I'm really grateful that he does that. He's also one of our patrons. You can join him by, you know, clicking the link up there or clicking the link down below. He was saying that he felt that the way the Wakandans were acting was a good kind of metaphor for the way that countries that think they have so much power act in other people's kind of territory in other countries. And it's just like, yeah, because you never really think of the Wakandans as being kind of not imperialist, but that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? But they kind of are, and there's a lot in that in this episode, because you have this idea that Zemo floats, which is that Carly is a kind of supremacist. And the fact that she's taken the serum and has the serum is what makes her a supremacist. Because it's one thing to kind of float ideas, but it's another to enforce those ideas with the kind of brute strength that Carly and her team have. And it's an interesting way to look at it, because it's coming from Zemo, you don't necessarily buy it straight away. But when you start to think about it, it's like, yeah, hold on, is she really?
Zemo speaks a lot of truth, and as you say, it's like kind of, he's got his own agenda and everything, but it on a lot of levels, they're relatable, motives that he has and reasons that he has them. And he's not really wrong about Carly. Like, when, and, to her shock later in the episode, when, Sam tells her that's, what Zemo thinks of her, she's shocked. She, couldn't possibly believe that, somebody would think that she's the supremacist. She thinks she's fighting the supremacist. But in a lot of cases, that's what happens, in real life.
Yeah. And also, it made me think of kind of sort of fandoms and things like that now, and kind of stuff you see on social media and things like that. It kind of makes you think, hold on, yeah, there is a point to that. There is a kind of an issue there that maybe needs addressing. But I mean, this episode gives us some great Zemo stuff. I think it's premium Zemo. Primo.
Primo Zemo, yes. Literally, I just can't even deal with how much I love him. Like, I seriously, like, I was excited, when they said he was going to be in this series, and I was like, oh man, I love this character. I can't wait to see what they do with him. But now I just want a whole series of just him. Like, I'm please, Marvel. If you're listening, I would really, really like a Thunderbolt series, please, starring Zemo. That would be really great.
Well, you never know.
Yeah, that's, I'm really hoping that, because, people have totally, gone nuts over his character. The highlight of my week was the hashtag release the Zemo cut.
Which, of course, I think that thing I sent you is you can access 1 hour of outtakes of Daniel Brühl dancing.
I've watched it. Hour well spent.
I don't know. I've never seen a man more uncomfortable on a dance floor, really.
Oh my god, it was so
good. But yeah, a lot of interesting ideas posited in this episode. And we then, we get an uneasy alliance between a lot of people in this one. But also, I think it's fascinating that Sam tries to talk Carly down, which was an interesting way, which I honestly didn't expect them to take it in that direction. Because one thing you very rarely see is the quote unquote good guys trying to talk the bad guys down. You sometimes see a bit of cajoling and threatening. I mean, we saw it. I mean, the biggest example I can think of is the first Avengers movie with Tony and Loki in the penthouse, which is a great scene. Mm-hmm. But Sam actually is concerned for her well-being. He does actually kind of show her empathy and sympathy, and I think because he thinks of her as a soldier.
Well, I mean, Sam, he's a compassionate guy. He was a counselor. He counseled, veterans. And so he can understand where she's coming from on personal level too, because, the government is trying to take his house.
Yeah.
What's being, done to him is really what Carly is fighting against. So he can relate to her, and he sees her as a kid who is, confused and misguided, and I think he would, he wants to try and help her, rather than kill her, because he can see that the alternative is probably going to be that people are going to die, and she's probably, it will probably be one of them. So I think he's totally got the right idea, and it's really nice to see that's the first option before violence. Like, whether or not he's an Avenger, he tries to reach out to her as a human being first.
And we also have Sam and Bucky reaching out again to Sharon. Now, I as we talked about in sort of around private messages during the week, and I mentioned to Dan in messages, I think Sharon's a strong contender for the Power Broker.
I think the internet agrees with you. It's kind of becoming a more and more popular theory because at this stage, we're 4 episodes in. It seems kind of unlikely that they're going to introduce you to another villain at this point that you haven't already met and interacted with. So I would say Sharon is very high on the list in terms of characters that it could be. My other sort of guess is that possibly Bucky's therapist might maybe be.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
She's like a sort of way behind Sharon in terms of strong contenders, but she's, again, we know that she had a military background, and there were a few questions about her, so I did think, okay, that's also possible. But with Sharon, there's definitely something going on with Sharon. I mean, she's got satellites. She's got we know that the Power Broker is rich and influential in Madripoor. Sharon is very rich and, obviously, connected. And what was she even doing in Lowtown when they showed up? Is another question.
And here's the interesting thing is that given the time frame, we don't know that Sharon wasn't snapped away. Now, I'm assuming she wasn't, because I don't think we've ever been told, Sharon Carter, disappeared when Thanos did the snap. So she's had plenty of time after Civil War to kind of organize her power base and take over. And it does seem as though there's always been a power broker in Madripoor, from what we were told in episode 3, I believe. So it could be that she's kind of coming and taking over. Or, I mean, my other theory is that she's still working for the US government in some way, or for some new form of shield. And that becoming the power broker is a bit like, again, as I think I can't remember if we talked about this last episode. I know we've had a conversation over it, about it. As with Daredevil in the comics taking over the Kingpin position,
right?
And Batman always having a plan to take over crime in Gotham should it ever get too bad. That there is always this thing of you become the villain in order to control just how bad the damage gets. So I mean, I tend to lean towards that because I think that Sharon has far too strong a moral code to become an outright villain. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid theory. And they've kind of thrown us some breadcrumbs to make us think, well, maybe she really could, have completely, turned against the United States and, and them. And, basically, I mean, she's very cynical. She comes across as, basically very, disenchanted with the United States government, which she used to devote her life to, but, you know, it could all be just a front.
And there's part of me that would actually love it if she is kind of, you know, she's just gone rogue. Like I would kind of love that, because I just think it would be an interesting color for that character to try on, you know. Right. So I'll be happy either way, I think.
Yeah. Either way, you know, it's interesting to kind of watch things unfold with her, and you know, I'm hoping by next episode we may get some sort of reveal one way or the other.
Yeah, so next episode is 5 of 6, so we're now sort of ploughing headlong towards the end. And of course, Liz, the end of the show.
Well, I mean, I don't think we're there yet in terms of talking about it, but my God.
Yeah.
And yeah, first I'd like to kind of talk about John Walker in terms of earlier in the episode, like, so he comes barging after them in, you know, the middle of Latvia, where they've gone to try and figure out how to find Carly. You know, at that point in the episode, you know, they kind of are hunting down like leads on Danya Madani, who, as it turned out, was sort of a mother figure to Carly and a lot of the people, you know, who lived there. So she was kind of this big pillar of the community. So so they're all kind of trying to, you know, get the townspeople to talk to them. And Sam and Bucky have like zero success. And, you know, Zemo, meanwhile, like goes full on like Chronicles of Narnia. And
you know, if you hadn't have done that reference, I would have.
Busts out his like box of Turkish delight and like goes to sing nursery rhymes to like the local children, and is like totally, you know, he just like immediately gets the information from them, and you know, eventually tells Sam and Bucky, yeah, okay, I did, like, you know, I do know when the funeral is, and you know, but I'm not gonna tell you because you're gonna just like, as soon as I give you that information, then I'm useless to you. And you know, he already knows that he's got the Dora Milaje, like, you know, coming, you know, within hours. So he's just trying to make the most of the time he's got. And you know, we basically see Zemo just like, you know, he managed to complete his mission.
I mean, his kind of motivations at this point are very up in the air. Like it's very strange because he knows that the Dora Milaje will take him, or he's pretty sure they will. But I guess actually once John Walker comes into the mix, it's kind of, well, you know, chaos factory time. And he knows there's going to be this kind of battle that we get, which is probably one of the funniest scenes in ages. But I mean, first we've got to talk about a bit about, you know, as we say, Sam tries to talk Carly down, but is interrupted by
John Walker. Yeah, is just such a jerk. Like, you know, like this episode, I was just like, you just want to smack him. He's so cocky. He's like, you know, just trying to like, you know, sort of throw his weight around all the time, you know, and nobody takes him seriously.
Because I don't know. And also I've got to say, I've gone completely back around on this thing now where I thought Sam, because of Sam's sort of slightly cocky attitude, I didn't think he'd make a good Cap, but now I kind of absolutely see. Of course he would, and I feel kind of stupid for.
I mean, I never really saw Sam as being all that cocky. You know, especially when you see a character who truly is like this guy, you know, Walker.
Totally.
You know, because you know, Sam, like, he's, you know, he's got a very strong sort of moral code, and you know, he treats people how he would want to be treated. Like, you know, this guy kind of just goes around talking down to everyone, you know, and he keeps pointing out the fact that he's Captain America, And it just like, it's embarrassing because everybody who's looking at him is like, yeah, not really though.
Well, you know, he has his fandoms and stuff, but you can just really clearly see how unstable he is. He's getting more and more angry. He's more and more ready to kind of throw down all the time, and that again, the contrast in attitude between him and Sam is amazing, because Sam, it's just like, we don't need to fight over this. We can just, I think I can get this person to come around. Yeah.
And Walker, I mean, in that scene where Sam is actually getting through to Carly, and Walker is stewing outside and pacing back and forth, it's the fact that he is not the one calling the shots that's really bothering him. It's the fact that, you know, he's not the one in control and giving the orders. And, you know, he's just so desperate to, you know, sort of have everyone recognize him as their, you know, as Cap, the leader and everything, that, you know, he loses sight of, you know, what they're actually trying to achieve.
Anyway, it made me think about Captain America, and it's how fitting Steve Rogers was for the time that he was created. I mean, on a meta level, yes, you know, or at least looking back to World War II, and the kind of can-do American spirit of that time. You kind of got the Captain America you deserved, and I think now you look at John Walker and you've got the Captain America you deserve. And I think it's very much kind of on the mind of the writers and directors that they're creating the right Captain America for the time, and whereas I think actually when you look at the spirit of the idealism of what you might want your country to represent, because no one walks around thinking their country's crap, do they? And I'm not saying America is crap, because I don't believe that, and I don't believe the UK is crap. I think there are always elements in countries that are kind of terrible, and those elements sometimes have the loudest voice, sadly, and the most sway and things like that. But I think that Sam actually now represents a lot more of the idealism of what, you know, a country should be. So again, just, you know, I'm now Sam all the way for Cap, and by the time we get to the end of this episode, which we'll talk about in a bit. So I mean, it all goes wrong. Carly and her buddies hand them their asses. Zemo slips his change. Now he keeps confounding me, because you keep expecting him to escape, and he doesn't. He just wants to complete his agenda,
which in this episode he does. I mean, yeah, he slips the handcuffs, and he's the one to find Carly, and she's got the serum on her, and he does exactly what Zemo would do. He smashes it all, and he nearly is completely successful, except that Walker, you know, kind of comes in at the last minute and slams him in the head with the shield, and manages to get the one last vial.
And again, talking about salvaged, she's too far gone in her kind of idealism and her zealotry. Therefore, the easiest thing to do is just take her out of the picture, because once you take the head out, the rest just falls away. And in a way, I kind of think Zemo is right, although I prefer Sam's way. I think Zemo is right.
Right. I mean, I think that is what, you know, what has made him so compelling to watch through, you know, the last two episodes, is that really, you know, and in Civil War, of course, too. He's kind of right. It's like, you know, obviously wouldn't necessarily agree with the way that he does, sort of get his way, but you can't really disagree with why, he thinks the way he does.
Right.
And Walker, I mean, it's hard to say. If Walker had been the one alone with Carly, he may have, we've seen Walker use a gun, which, obviously Captain America would never do. But I believe in like episode 2, we see him shoot at some of the Flag Smashers.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's hard to say. Maybe he would have shot her.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible that he might have, if no one was watching. And then, of course, we see this temptation, because Zemo's action is to just destroy the serum quickly as you can. Get rid of it. Take this thing out of the equation. Take her out of the equation. And, of course, John's action is somewhat different, because he isn't Captain America in any way except the uniform, really. And that has been playing on his mind. You see it playing on his mind in this episode. And of course, Lamar is there, trying to keep him in check as well. But I think ultimately powerless. And the problem is he had so many kind of emotional problems to start with. He was never going to be a good fit for that kind of job.
Yeah. As we come to find out, all of these gold medals that he was awarded for his excellence and, everything, they're based on, he said, we had to do horrible things, for me to be given those medals. He's clearly screwed up by it.
Yeah. And as, again, something that Dan Bussey pointed out, Dan's definitely the star of this week's show. He said, he's clearly suffering from PTSD and that's, been untreated. But that leads us to some very interesting dark places. But before we get to those dark places, the Dora Milaje have to be dealt with, and they've come for Zemo. Now, I love this whole sequence,
this scene from start to finish was amazing. Like, for every character involved, really.
And of course, best of all, you see Zemo's reaction. So the Dora Milaje come in, they want Zemo. John Walker comes in, he wants Zemo. Sam and Bucky do not want to give Zemo up, though, because they still feel he has usefulness, as he's proved. And as these guys go to war, Zemo,
he's got a drink.
Because again, it's kind of watching to see which way it's going to go. And I think really his money all the time is on Sam and Bucky. Like I think he actually has a lot of faith in those guys to do what they say they're going to do, and back it up. And of course, Walker gets his ass handed to him by the Dora Milaje, which it's just such a great scene. The combat stuff, and we find out something about Bucky's arm, which we didn't know, which is
that was
they have the ability to just remove the arm.
Right. I mean, well, it was it was given to him in Wakanda to replace his his old arm, and obviously they put like a failsafe in there if they ever had to fight him, which he didn't know.
Yeah, but also what's interesting about that scene, if you compare it up to the first scene, the show opener with him being deprogrammed, so he's no longer a tool of any government, but he kind of still is now. Right,
unbeknownst to him, he can't.
It does. You can tell it does feel like an utter betrayal.
Right.
So,
and basically it's, the Wakandans, they're not stupid. Like, even though they did, sort of help him in every way they could, they obviously still don't trust anyone, but themselves. But this scene was really really interesting to watch on kind of so many different levels, because it's really what pushes Walker over the edge. He not only gets his ass kicked by a bunch of he makes a point to say after they don't even have the serum, they don't even have the super soldier powers, but it's also a bunch of women who kick his ass. And you can just see his
after Carly is kind of
right, who's also kicked his ass, and you can see that sticks in his craw. It's unsaid, but you can see his sort of masculine insecurity all over the place.
I will say in his defense, though, as much as I don't want to defend him, the Dora Milaje, I've always felt that they are kind of superpowered because they're Wakandan, because of the vibranium that's kind of, we know, is in the soil and it's therefore in the food they eat. It would be, you know what I mean? I think there is an element of superpowers with the Dora Milaje. And the Black Panther is kind of the version of that. It's the kind of uber, kind of amped up version of that. But he gets his arse soundly kicked. But he deserves it because he's a dick.
Yeah, I know, and it's so funny watching like Sam and Bucky and Zemo all watching. When it really first kicks off, and Sam's like, Bucky, come on, he's just standing there looking strong, John. Good job.
Yeah. But again, thoroughly deserves it. And of course, Sam holds his own in that fight without any serum, without any. And we do have that moment where he's asked by Zemo, were you ever offered the serum? And would you have taken it? And he's just like, no, straight away. Which, again, speaks so much to his character, but also speaks partly to the fact that he kind of, I think, has an understanding of where Zemo's coming from. Because I think that Sam feels that people with superpowers are ultimately a bit too dangerous to have around as well. So I mean that's kind of, I don't know where that will play out. I still think all the stuff we've seen in the trailers of Sam bouncing the shield around, it's all from the very end of the show. And I think that's how the show's going to end, personally. But so we're not actually going to get Captain America, but we know that will be coming next. But I just think that there's a lot of interesting stuff there, and of course, no one ends up with what they want at the end of that scene. The Wakandans don't end up with Zemo.
Neither does Walker.
No. But of course, that then sends us into this spiral, aided by Sharon, who kind of is keeping an eye on Walker, and they're tracking him. They know where he's going, and of course, he's going to Carly. He's gonna try and take her down, which leads to the kind of, I think, one of the most earth-shaking scenes in the whole series, because,
or of any Marvel series.
Yeah, I mean, so they track Carly. Sam and Bucky track Walker to where Carly is too. Everyone converges. And Lamar is captured, but manages to escape. But it's also revealed within the fights that John has taken one of the serum vials and used it. Now, I mean, talk about finding someone even more dangerous than the Flag Smashers to take the serum. It's definitely him.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, over the course of the series, we've kind of started to really see the cracks, in his sort of facade and and see, how unstable he really is. And, the fight with the Dora Milaje was probably the thing that, like fully tipped him over the edge. But I never had any doubt that he was going to take the serum, even though he kind of has a hypothetical conversation with Lamar about it, who made a really interesting point. It doesn't being given the serum just make you more of who you already are. And with Steve, that was true. He was a really good person to begin with. And, it just made him, all the more sort of obligated to, to do the right thing, being given the responsibility of, the powers that he was given. And, in the case of Carly, it just made her more, more dedicated to her cause, and and it made her perhaps a worse person. And with Walker, we see right away that it has just brought out really what we already kind of knew about him, but magnified by 1,000.
Now in this fight, of course, Lamar is killed, it seems, by Carly, sending. Well, no, not by Carly, isn't it? One of the other guys.
It was by Carly, and it was not really intentional. She, Lamar just kind of ran into the fray with all these superpowered people punching each other, and Carly just, like, without really looking to see who it was, just punched him full force into a pillar, and it just killed him instantly. It would seem, and she didn't pull her punch. And it wasn't, I have no doubt that she didn't intend to kill a non-powered person in that moment, but she still did it without thinking. And that kind of plays into, Zemo's problem with people being given the serum, and, the responsibility that, having those kind of powers, sort of is put upon you, so it was a really sad moment.
Yeah. And you genuinely feel it, because of the two of them, Lamar is the more likable and the more human. And of course, then that leads to probably one of the more shocking scenes we've seen, where John pins one of these guys down outside in public, in full view of everyone, and bludgeons him to death with the shield. Now, like, the violence of that, I was really surprised at.
Yeah, because it's not something you see very often in a Marvel series.
No.
Like, apart from the Marvel Netflix shows, obviously, like, you really don't see a whole lot of blood and gore in the fights. But this was, like, I mean, honestly shocking. Like, my jaw was just on the floor, when this happened. And I think, obviously, for it to have the impact it had, you needed to see that, like, blood on the shield. Like, that was, like, just shocking imagery.
And of course, as with everything today, he's being filmed by hundreds of people on their mobile phones. Now, I've got a feeling that America, the government, is going to turn their back on John.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's probably going to wind up on the run, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be the thing that actually pushes him over the edge. Now, I can't really necessarily see him sort of siding up with Carly, but it does put him in a position of wanting to kind of dismantle governments, I guess. Like, I mean, quite possibly. But we won't know for an episode.
No, I mean, something tells me that, he knows that, he's going to have to be, held accountable for, like, murder in full view of, a town full of people. There's really no escape from it. So I think it will probably be put to Sam and Bucky to have to bring him in.
Yeah. Or it might be, I mean, it might even be more interesting, although not kind of morally agreeable, but more interesting if the government actually kind of just goes, yeah, but he had to do what he had to do, and
well, yeah, there's certainly the possibility that they could try and like put a spin on it and say, yeah, he had to do it, and I make up a story because that does happen, certainly. But the fact that people were filming it is going to make it very difficult for them to do that. So, it's possible, but unlikely, I would say, that he's going to come away from this. You know.
I mean, what a thrilling episode, and certainly for me, a real kind of tick up from last week, which I found a bit kind of choppy and inconsistent. But like, I feel this kind of all cylinders firing this week. So completely thrilled by this.
I mean, like for me, okay, I really didn't like, last week's episode brought me nothing but joy. And this week's episode, maybe even more so. Like I have, so far, this came out yesterday and I've watched it 4 times.
I haven't even had time to watch it a second time yet.
Oh my God, I have nothing but time to watch it. I watched last week's over and over too. Like I just, I cannot contain my love.
I normally do them twice. I normally watch them twice. Once, sort of a couple of hours before we do these, just to make some notes. But I didn't even have time for that, which is why I've kind of been so desperately pleased that you remember them so exactly, because I couldn't. But you remember the emotional high points and things like that, and I've absolutely enjoyed the series so far. 2 more episodes to go before we bid it a tearful farewell.
There's going to be a lot of tears.
Yeah. Well, and also we've then got Loki in June and Black Widow in July, which of course we hope you'll be back for. But lots of stuff happening. Funny enough, talking of other things happening, on the YouTube channel next week, I think it will be out Tuesday or Wednesday. We should have a new episode of the Comics Touch with Gemma. We took a bit of a break, so we've got another episode coming this week on Monday, and then on about Tuesday or Wednesday we'll have an interview with Erica Schultz, who's a wonderful writer. I'm sure everyone watching has probably heard of Erica. She's done a lot of work for Marvel, DC, a bunch of other publishers. She's an editor as well. She does animation. She's
multi-talented.
Yes, definitely. But we had a lovely chat about her new Kickstarter, which is The Deadliest Bouquet, which I think arrives on Kickstarter the 11th of May. But in the context of that, she started talking to me about Singles, and I was so surprised, because Singles is a movie that I thought only I loved. So it's a movie from the 90s with Matt Dillon and Bridget Fonda and Campbell Scott and a bunch of other really great actors. But it was fun kind of reminiscing about the 90s with her on that stuff. So do watch that, guys. It is a fun interview and went places I didn't expect it to go, which is always good. If the interviews go in a completely different direction from the one you expect, they're always worth watching. Do take a look at our Patreon. Do follow us on Twitter at The Comic Crush. You can follow Liz at Liz C. Jordan on Twitter. Follow us at The Comic Crush also on Instagram. Like the page on Facebook. Do give this video a like, please, and subscribe to the videos, because there is literally, as I've just pointed out, new stuff every week. We've got a ton of stuff coming, and podcasts too. So hello, and of course goodbye to everyone listening on the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure doing this again. Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to come and do this. It's always great to have your expertise, knowledge, and photographic memory of every moment in these shows.
Takes a lot of dedication.
Liz will, of course, now be spending the rest of her day drawing frame by frame recreations of every moment featuring Sebastian Stan.
While watching the hour-long Bruno dancing footage on repeat.
Yeah, but no, it's been great fun. Catch up was on the Crush. There's lots of stuff there. Thecomiccrush.com. Do take a look. Just a new article gone up today. Plenty of stuff in the web store as well. If you find yourself without any comics to read this week, grab some from there. Liz, thank you so much.
But of course.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Catch you next time on The Crush. Bye-bye.